Good evening, everybody. It is Saturday night in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined for our Steelers post-game show by Post-Gazette sports columnist Paul Zeise after a 34-17 Steelers loss to the Ravens. I'll fix that graphic in a second. Paul, I think this game was closer than the final score indicated, but the Steelers also were not particularly close to winning, made some huge mistakes that cost them points, both ways. What's your reaction to this game? That I think people were willing to give up that game last week, thinking you could win this week, win the division, get the good vibes going again. Now that they're not, they're in a dogfight to win this division. And if they don't win the division, then they're possibly looking at a playoff road game now.
Yeah, for sure. I would say one thing that's very clear, they got to get healthy. I thought their defense is beat up, and I know TJ Watt played, but he didn't look like TJ Watt at all for most of the game. So their defense was beat up, and I think that showed just basically if you watch how the game unfolded. But I thought one of the interesting things was that the Steelers actually were moving the ball and making some plays on offense. And then, they just the pick six basically changed the game completely. And after that, it kind of felt like the Steelers almost sort of gave up. They just got outplayed in this game. And I thought, again, nobody wants to hear about injuries, but not having Pickens obviously is a factor. Not having, three of your four secondary guys basically after Joey Porter goes out. Not having Watt 100%. You play a really good team. The Ravens are a really good football team. And guess what? You play a good team like that and you're not at full strength, you end up, with the result that you get, that you had. And, I think they gave up 418 yards of offense to the Ravens. Derrick Henry ran pretty much at will. I thought one of the dumbest decisions ever was, Derrick Henry started really getting going and was running downhill and had that like 50-yard run or whatever it was. And the very next play, they throw the ball and it's an interception. I thought right there, you have the Steelers basically on their heels. You should just keep pounding them. You want the clock to move. And at the very least, you come out of that with three. Of course, it didn't matter because the Steelers ended up throwing a pick six. But overall, you play a good team. You're not at 100%. And you know what? You make some mistakes. You end up losing.
Yeah, excited to dig into it, Paul. Lots of things to get to tonight. Before we do, just want to thank our primary sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. There's no better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning on your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. Paul, Russell Wilson fumbles down near the goal line in the first half, throws the pick six. In the second half, arguably a 21-point swing. And regardless of anything else we're going to talk about tonight, Paul, you don't usually overcome 21-point swings in the NFL in any game against any team, let alone in a game basically for the division against your rival that has arguably the MVP of the league as their quarterback. Could we just go through Russ's performance a little bit and your thoughts on, how he was able to move the ball, but made these critical mistakes? And it's not the first time in the last handful of weeks that's happened.
Well, the fumble was a terrible, terrible, terrible decision. I mean, that's 100% on Russell Wilson. You've got to know when you're getting down there, you've got 25 yards or 30 yards. You're down near the goal line there. You know what? Slide. Make it easy on yourself. Slide. Don't try and be a hero. So there was that. The pick six, I didn't think it was a bad decision. I just thought it was a bad throw. I mean, he threw the ball behind was it their 15th string tight end? What's his name? The guy that scored a touchdown.
Pruitt.
Yeah. Michael Pruitt or whatever his name is. I thought that wasn't a great. How did you? I hated the decision to go for it on fourth and whatever it was, 5 or 6 at like the 45, 46 yard line. And I hated even more the fact that they went, tried to throw a deep ball down the field. That being said, the throw to Calvin Austin again on the sideline, the throw to Cordarrelle Patterson in the end zone. There's still a lot of throws that he makes that he's the only guy on their roster and one of the only guys in the league that can make it. So hopefully he doesn't make bad decisions. He made a few in this game, and so it cost the Steelers. But by the same token, you kind of feel like the Steelers have a chance to win in these kind of games now because they can move the ball, because he can throw the ball, because of Russell Wilson's presence. So I know this is probably not what people want to hear, but I strangely kind of thought this game was going to play out this way when I found out who was out and who wasn't. And the fact that the Ravens had a lot more riding on it than the Steelers, I kind of thought this might be the way this game plays out a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Paul. Just a little more to Russell Wilson. Was that scramble play where he fumbled an example of why we have seen Justin Fields at different points? Because I think we've had these conversations about the Justin Fields package, and is it just a matter of getting him in there and keeping him engaged? Is it appropriate? Is his athleticism different enough from Russell Wilson's to justify it? Did you see on that play why maybe they trust Justin Fields on some of those plays a little bit more, and that's why they've not really kind of let Russ run loose for much of the season, just for the simple fact that he may not be as athletic anymore as he thinks that he is.
Yeah, but he moves around really well. He does move around. For a guy his age, he moves around pretty well, makes plays on the run, makes throws on the run. I like him. I do like him. And some of the things he does. I just think that scramble was one of these things where he started running downhill and started smelling the idea that he was going to be the hero. And he tried to make a play that probably he shouldn't have tried to make. And that's always, going to get you in trouble when you're a quarterback. You get down there, they tell you basically, unless you're Josh Allen, we've even seen Lamar Jackson now started to slide, more than he used to. Unless you're Josh Allen, when you get into traffic there, just slide. The Steelers would have had 1st and goal to 3 at the very least. You get a field goal out of it as opposed to what happened.
Did you have an issue with Arthur Smith's play calling? I think he's starting to get the I think a lot of people have been generally satisfied with him, but I'm looking at the comments and there's beginning to be some unrest there, Paul. What are your thoughts on Arthur Smith and the game that he called, given the constraints he had without George Pickens in there?
Well, the only play that I didn't like really was the deep shot on 4th and 6. I thought at that point if you're going to go for it on 4th and 6 there, right? You have to get a first down. Like that has to be your real priority, getting a first down. And I thought when you throw it deep like that, it's basically a 50-50 ball. And at that point, you're leaving a little bit of it up to chance. So I think his play calling was fine today. I didn't have a big problem with much of anything they did. I thought they could have got Pat Freiermuth involved a little bit more, maybe a little bit earlier. Still not in love with some of their sideways pass, and toss plays and stuff, but that's just sort of a part of the offense. And I kind of feel like, the play calling was fine. That wasn't the problem. The execution was the problem.
Paul, you mentioned Pat Freiermuth, largely taken out of this game, certainly in any of the weighty downs, as Mike Tomlin might call them. He finishes with 3 catches for 16 yards in this game. I think this is one of the rare games, Paul, where you can say that whatever problems the offense have had did not seem to be on the receivers. You get 4 catches for 65 yards from Calvin Austin. Van Jefferson made a couple plays, 2 for 27. Ben Skoranek made a couple of plays, 2 for 25. Mike Williams, same thing, 3 for 24. Not huge numbers individually, but you add them up. They did a lot. Was it a matter of the Ravens saying we're going to take Pat Freiermuth away and make those guys make the plays to beat us?
No, I thought there was plays that he was open. I just think that, Russell Wilson was maybe looking down the field a little bit more than he wanted to. And, if you look at it, it's pretty much every single game is the same, even when Pickens plays. If you look at what Russell Wilson does, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different guys caught passes. I'm sorry, 9 different guys caught passes, 10 were targeted. That's just sort of the way that he does it, right? And to me, I'm okay with that on some levels. But the flip side of that is you want to get the ball to your best players more than the other guys, And right now, Pat Freiermuth is one of your best players. I just thought that they left him on the shelf for far too long in this game.
Paul, the running game got going better than it did last week. They finished 24 carries, 4.9 yards. Jaylen Warren had 48 yards on 12 carries. He out-touches Najee Harris, interestingly. Najee has 9 for 42. So they were able to run the ball. I feel like they ended up in the trap somewhat that they were in last week, Paul, of the game script just did not go their way to do more than that on the ground. They're playing from behind much of the game. Certainly in that fourth quarter, those guys weren't able to be as involved. What was your read on how the running game bounced back today and how Baltimore was kind of able to neutralize it with, the game script?
Well, I think one of the things that happened with the running game is, they fell behind, and so they weren't able to use it to dictate, what they normally like to dictate. This was one of those games, and I got to look at the numbers to see if the numbers sort of back it up. Yeah, I thought Jaylen Warren ran really hard today. I thought Najee Harris ran really hard today. I really, really actually was encouraged by the run game. And again, as we always talk about, the run game, you kind of can't dictate when you're going to use it, because if you fall behind, it's hard to really go hard, heavy with the run game, especially in the second half. And I think one of the things that the Ravens did really well is outside of the play to Calvin and Austin, for the most part, they didn't give up a big pass or a big play like that. And so they were able to, basically minimize the run game a little bit, but force the Steelers to try and throw, underneath. And I just thought it was actually a very good game plan by Baltimore. The Steelers have proven at times they can run the football. They can do it where they can average more than 4 yards a carry, and they can even be more physical maybe sometimes than the other teams they're playing and all that good stuff. But there are times when it stalls, and so the idea that you have Russell Wilson now is that you should be able to throw the ball down the field a little bit and open things up for the run game, and vice versa.
Paul, you mentioned Michael Pruitt catching that touchdown. I wasn't super convinced. There's some athletes that I hear their names a lot, Paul, and I've always said, I forget the guy's name from the Penguins during their one Stanley Cup run, but I always say I'm not convinced that they exist. Michael Pruitt got involved today. Ben Skoranek, I mentioned him earlier. Do you give Arthur Smith any credit for how he's found ways to make these guys at least vaguely useful with Russell Wilson at quarterback? I think Skoronek's been, more useful than a lot of guys they've had playing on that fourth and fifth receiver role in the last handful of years.
Well, I'll say this. I get a little nervous when the one play, I think Russell Wilson took a sack, but Tom Brady was saying that Scotty Miller was they had Scotty Miller going deep, but he couldn't, he wasn't open. But that was what they were looking to do. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe we should not be relying on Scotty Miller getting deep to create a big play. And so I think one of the things about it is, to your point, Pruitt, I think didn't Connor Heyward had a catch, Cordarrelle Patterson had a catch,
touchdown, yeah.
Scotty Miller, and then we actually saw we had a Mike Williams sighting too. I think, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I think he had 3 catches on the day. Yeah.
So my point is, I think that people that are attacking Arthur Smith, I don't think that they're fully understanding how hard it is to call plays when you've got Pickens hurt. and not a whole lot else to work with. I think he's done a pretty good job of getting guys open and getting guys, giving them opportunities to make plays and stuff.
How much does George Pickens, if he plays, in this abbreviated week against the Chiefs, if you see him by the end of the season, how much does he change the outlook? How much does he fix within this offense? We're going to talk about the defense here in a minute. I think there's a lot else going on there that George Pickens cannot fix individually, but at least in terms of the offense and the way, it's kind of been knocking at the door of success for the last couple of weeks, but hasn't been able to put it together. Is George Pickens, is it as simple as he's not there and he will fix things when he comes back?
I mean, him not being there, obviously, when he's your best receiver. He's probably your best player on offense, really. I mean, if you think about it. And so you take him off your team and you're not going to be the same. What he does is he makes teams deal with the ball getting pushed down the field. He makes teams deal with him, taking the top off the defense or whatever that stupid cliche is. He makes teams, guard, they have to guard him. And not only that, they have to basically usually use two people or more than one guy to try and take him away. And if you do that, guess what? It opens things up for your other guys. It opens things up for some of the other guys you have that you have the ability at that point then to dictate, hey, if you're going to commit more than one guy to George Pickens down the field, now, you know what? We can do a whole lot of other stuff, underneath or whatever on the other side of the field. So I think when you lose a guy like him, it changes everything for you. I really do. I think it changes everything.
Paul, we're going to wrap up on the offensive discussion here with the fourth down calls. You mentioned them earlier. You did not like the 4th and 6. I know there are a lot of people that did not like the 4th and 6. And then there was the 4th and 12 that they decided to punt when they obviously needed points, that they probably weren't going to get the possessions they needed to tie the score by kicking. I didn't like the last one. I didn't mind the first one, the 4th and 6 as much. You're in a game where your defense is suspect. You're missing guys in the backfield. You're playing Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson were both cooking in this game. I think if you kick there, you're basically conceding the game in the same way that you were with the 4th and 12 later on. So I liked it. I liked the aggression and saying we've got to score touchdowns to win this game. If you're not going to score touchdowns, you're not going to win. But explain your thoughts on that matter.
Well, let me say one thing. If you're going to go for it on 4th and 6, you absolutely have to go for it on 4th and 12. I mean, it made no sense at that point. You went, so I hated the decision to punt just because the time before you basically on 4th and 6 said, well, we're playing to win or we're going to try and win. What I did not like was the 4th and 6 call. I don't like going for it like that. There's some situations I say, okay, yeah, if you got 4th and 3 or 4th and 4 and you have a one-on-one matchup, go for it. But 4th and 6 at that point in the game against this team, if you're going to go for it, you needed to go and get 7 to 8, 9, 10 yards. Make sure that you get the first down. Keep the drive going. And I thought, a high risk, I guess it's a high risk, high reward type play is probably not the way to go there. You want a lower risk, lower reward, but all you're really trying to get is a first down. I didn't necessarily hate the fact that they went for it on 4th and 6, but man, I hated the play call because I thought it was unnecessary to take that chance, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the big problem is A, he wasn't open, and it seemed like Russ wanted to throw that ball anyway. And B, I didn't see, but where were the check down options? It didn't seem like he was really considering any of them at all. And so you're kind of telegraphing what you want to do in that circumstance. And I think that makes, converting a play like that more difficult than it already is. Paul, we're going to get to the defense now. I see people champing at the bit in the comments to do that. Before we do, just want to thank another couple of sponsors. If you were diagnosed with mesothelioma and lung cancer, call your local attorneys at Goldberg, Persky, and White. For over 40 years, their firm has represented thousands of lung cancer and mesothelioma victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX or visit gpwlaw.com for a free consultation. Also want to thank Archie's. The game is always on at Archie's on Carson. Pittsburgh's best place for food, drinks, and sports. Open Sundays for the game, 12 p.m. to 2 a.m. Be sure to check out their daily drink specials and stop in for 80-cent wing nights Monday through Thursday. Tell them Paul Zeise sent you. Paul, I'm going to start with the secondary because we talked about it last week. I think we've talked about it at different points on different shows on this channel. They chose not to address their lack of depth. They knew that they did not have great guys behind Joey Porter and Deontay Jackson, that even Deontay Jackson himself was a guy that was going to have to prove himself. And I think their lack of success today was as simple as that these guys, Corey Trice, Darius Rush, that we're in the dregs of April and June. We're talking about these guys and their length and their ability to contribute in exactly these types of moments. Was it as simple as they missed the evaluation on those guys? And they weren't as good as they thought that they were and did not develop the way that they hoped they would? Or is it just a matter of you weren't aggressive enough to go out and get some more proven options? I'm not talking about going out and getting Champ Bailey in his prime. I'm just talking about serviceable, Mike Hilton types, reliable guys that can make some plays and not lose you games like some of these guys did today.
Well, I mean, I hate to be like this, Adam, but you and I basically talked about the pieces, the secondary pieces, beyond basically maybe Deontay Jackson was very scary. I was never in the camp that these guys that they got basically off the scrap heap or whatever, that these guys were going to be good enough. And I said, one of the things before the season started, I thought their depth in the secondary was not good enough. And listen, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Did we have James Pierre out there, or was he hurt? I can't remember. I'm looking at the guys they had out there, but we're talking about some of Beanie Bishop. I know he was a little bit of a folk hero after the first week when he had an interception or whatever. James Pierre was out there. Corey Trice, as you so eloquently mentioned. I mean, these guys just aren't good enough. Is Cam Sutton hurt? I forget, or is he playing? He's another guy. Remember, they signed him, and it was like, oh, well, he's going to be some sort of insurance policy.
He's been borderline a healthy scratch, Paul. I mean, he's been right. Dressed, but they just haven't been. Even last week, I think he only played 9 snaps when I was looking at the snap.
Think about it. You're Cam Sutton, and you can't break in on this lineup. I mean, that's and believe me, Joey Porter Jr. I mean, I'm looking at Cam Sutton. He did nothing. If he played, he has no stats for me to look at to figure out if he played or not. I'm sure we could get the snap count if we really cared. But my point is, you're Cam Sutton and you can't break into this. What are you doing at this point? And so Joey Porter Jr., I think, is flawed, obviously. He's got a long way to go. He's got a lot to do. But you know what? He's Deion Sanders compared to anybody else they have on this team. Deontay Jackson isn't great. I think that there's some things that he doesn't do great. But you know what? He's Rod Woodson compared to the rest of the guys. And so when you take those two guys out of the equation, couple that with the fact that T.J. Watt wasn't really 100%, so you lose something off your pass rush, which means Lamar Jackson has more time to look, to pick you apart. It's a recipe for kind of a disaster in many, many ways.
Paul, I don't want to let the safeties off the hook here either. I think Devontae Casey had a rough night. We finally get a turnover from Minka Fitzpatrick, but I think he was in on some of these busts as well. Man, it just reinforces the value of Deshaun Elliott to me, Paul, and it also says a lot about how far they've come defensively. The KZ was playing major downs for this defense last year and was a kind of a key piece. Man, it just seemed like he was chasing every time I saw him on the screen tonight.
Yeah, I thought it was hilarious on the chat and on social media. There are certain people that are big Minka Fitzpatrick fanboys. And, he makes that interception. And, of course, they all come out of the woodwork to tell us all that we're all idiots. And I'm thinking to myself, that was a play that any average safety makes. That's not a star play. That wasn't like some big-time play. I mean, Lamar Jackson basically threw him the ball. They got to get more out of him. There's no question. And he's good against the run, but they got to get more out of him, especially against the pass. I think he's a guy that he hasn't made nearly as many plays as they need him to for, what is he making, $18-19 million a year? And then you've got, the touchdown was really kind of to Mark Andrews was really kind of remarkable. When you consider that your safety was more concerned with whoever was on the outside who was actually covered than one of their biggest weapons down the middle of the field wide open. That was just a bad play by him.
Yeah, the Minkah fans, and there's I think I see you, Justin, in the chat. You guys love to tell us that he's not the problem, and if he was making $5 million, Paul, I'd absolutely agree. I think the way he takes away the middle of the field very often, when this defense is at full strength, is certainly an asset to this defense. But you're not paying him to just do that, and that's the problem. You're paying him to make transcendent plays. You're paying him when you're in a game like this where you're banged up and you're missing some of your guys in that secondary, to be a Pro Bowl Hall of Fame level player. And I think the bar is just so low for him with a lot of people, and including in that, front office, in that, with the coaching staff. It's that they've pigeonholed themselves so more into saying, yeah, he does these things well, that we're not talking about that in the context of what he makes. And that's my big problem with Fitzpatrick. Is I think he's a good player, but is he worth what he's being paid? And I think this is a game, where that maybe shows up the most, even though he doesn't.
I agree with you. I mean, I think that's, it's all about expectations, and when I look at a guy like KZ, I mean, what are we really expecting out of him? It's a different level of expectation, just like, you expect a lot more from TJ Watt than anybody else, that's going to play that position because he's TJ Watt. He's got to show up more than he does. He's got to make more plays than he does. He's got to be able to be one of their best players on defense, and I just don't know that he is.
Why is he the only? Why is he the only person on this defense other than maybe Watt, Heyward? Like, who just gets a pat? Everyone in the comments, you guys want to tear apart this defense, but we can't do it on any individual level except like saying the guys who are supposed to be not great suck.
Right.
Like, the best players got to be held accountable. And I'll even say it today. TJ Watt, they have, as a group, they had 1 sack. So Highsmith, Herbig, Watt come up with 1. And I think that's a big reason that they lost. And I won't put too much on TJ Watt individually because of the injury, but as a group, they didn't get the job done today. No. Why can we not say that about Minka Fitzpatrick? Why is it verboten?
It's amazing. He is like the protected guy on this defense among a number of people for some reason. And I look at even a guy like Cam Heyward, who I think is having a fabulous year. There's always criticism of him at times, and there's criticism of him and his contract at times. I mean, to me, I think he's played really well. I think I agree with you. When it comes to Minka Fitzpatrick, it's amazing that he's the one guy you're not allowed to criticize.
More than anyone.
And usually the rebuttal is, well, if you're criticizing him, it's because you don't know ball.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's frustrating that you can't say that, yes, he is a good player. His baseline floor is higher than almost any safety in the league. And everyone recognizes that. That is not the issue. The issue is are you getting enough out of him? What could you have for another $18 million, or let's say another $10 million if you're paying him less? You got to factor that in. It's a salary cap. There's only so many resources you can allocate. If you're allocating them to him, you're missing things in other places, and especially going into an offseason where you're going to have to pay Russ. You're going to have to pay some other guys. It's got to be a conversation that you have to have on a week-in, week-out basis if they continue to lose these games against these types of teams. Paul, will move on a little bit. Do you have anything else to say about the pass rush and how they weren't able to get home today, and how Watt looked to you and your level of concern about him moving into these last couple of games?
I'm confused why he was out there. He was clearly not 100%. And he actually at times looked like he was hurting the Steelers, not helping them. And so to me, he's your franchise guy. Why put him out there in a situation where he could get more injured? And if this thing becomes a lingering thing, I mean, you got another game in like 4 days or whatever it is. To me, I get it. You're trying to win and you want to win. But the thing about it is, the most important thing at the end of this year is that you're healthy going into the playoffs. Yeah, you want a home game. Yeah, you want to win the division. Yeah, I get all that stuff. But as I've asked people in the past who've made this argument with me, I've said, would you rather play, I don't know, the Broncos at Heinz Field without TJ Watt and without Pickens, or would you rather play, at Houston with TJ Watt and with Pickens? I don't think it's any question that you want your guys healthy. So to me, he looked like he wasn't healthy. He looked like he was actually at times hurting them, not helping them. Why put him out there and risk even further injury? You got another game 4 days from now. You want to be healthy for the playoffs. I don't know. That's just me.
Paul, what is your outlook for this team? Considering they've got another quick turnaround against the defending champs, they're close to clinching that number 1 seed. I wonder how many risks they're going to take with Patrick Mahomes this week. I expect he'll play, but will they run stuff that is risky, that's going to risk his health? I don't know. How are you looking at this game that usually we wait a little bit longer to preview, but there's such a tight turnaround? I want to get your thoughts now.
Well, I'll tell you, I think one of the things about it is I think the Ravens and the Steelers are going to be in a tough situation on Christmas Day. This is always a physical game, an emotional game. It's hard. It's a tough game. You know what I mean? They both have to play good opponents. I think a quick turnaround is probably not going to be good for either team. So to me, if I'm going to play it like I think the Ravens might lose to the Texans, I think the Steelers are winning the division. I think what's going to happen is the Steelers probably lose to the Chiefs, Ravens probably lose to the Texans, and then the Steelers can beat the Bengals and win the division. And, at that point, they'll be rested. They'll have, the extra days because they play Wednesday. They don't play again until the next Sunday. I think, honestly, it's not time to panic. I think they probably played a little bit above their head early, got some, fortunate bounces in a couple of games. And, and so now there's a little bit of a regression and, injuries are catching up and all that other stuff. But I think, honestly, the Chiefs are going to be a tough assignment. The Chiefs' defense is really, really good. It's Patrick Mahomes. He's Patrick Mahomes. They seem to be playing better football as of late. Their last 2 weeks now, they really haven't had to do that thing where they pull out a miracle win at the end. So I think it's going to be a tough assignment for the Steelers, especially if they're not healthy, if their secondary doesn't get healthy.
Paul, last question on the Steelers before I do want to get a few thoughts from you on the college football playoff that did unfold today. Deontay Johnson, the rumors have been floated that he may come back to the Steelers. He may go to the Chiefs. He may go X, Y, or Z. Any thoughts on that? Given the state of the receivers room, do you consider bringing in a guy that you unceremoniously dumped to the worst team in the league because he's familiar and because he can potentially be a little bit of a late firecracker for your lineup? And you're no one's saying sign Deontay Johnson for a 3-year contract, but can you live with the things that you don't love about him for a month?
I never thought I would be saying this, but at this point, do you think Deontay Johnson's actually better than the two guys that they have, not named Pickens?
I don't know if he's better than Calvin Austin at this point.
That's what I mean. And if he's not, is he going to be happy coming in and not being the second guy? Is he going to be happy coming in and maybe being the fourth guy, and not getting targeted and all that other stuff? I don't know if I'm bringing him back and putting him in the locker room.
Is his career not on the line at this point? Does he not has anyone had less leverage to complain than Deontay Johnson?
Yeah, that's what I mean, though. But my point is, I'm just looking at it and saying, I just don't know if I want to put that guy in your locker room. I just don't. I think the locker room's good. I think they're very much, have good chemistry and all that other stuff. I don't know that I'm bringing him in. I just don't.
Everyone's in the comments is screaming at us that we're very wrong about this. And listen, I empathize. I understand the dissatisfaction. If you told me you're going to get Deontay Johnson the last couple of years, then sure, he's better than Calvin Austin. I believe that. I don't know that that's the guy that you're getting at this stage, given what's going on with his career over the last 2 months, and given that this is a different offense than he was in a year ago.
Want to bring that guy into your locker room, knowing what he's been through this year, number one. Number two, knowing he's not going to be your number two guy, and so which means he's probably not going to be happy. Do you want to bring that guy into your locker room? The answer is probably not. If they do, wonderful. Maybe he'll help them win. I just think he's a guy I would avoid.
If the receivers hadn't had a decent day today, maybe I'm singing a different tune. But, coming off this performance, and if you do get Pickens back, I think the group is not enough, quote unquote. But, he's not the guy I'm clamoring for. Paul, let's wrap the show with this. Penn State blows out SMU in the college football playoff. They are now advancing to the Fiesta Bowl. James Franklin, I don't know if you believe that this is a big win, but it's bigger than most of his wins. He did not choke today. He won the game he was supposed to win. And now, of course, the bleeding has begun about, did SMU belong in the playoff? Did Indiana belong in the playoff? Clemson, they were going to be in because they were ACC champions, but there's a lot of complaining about the format. Any thoughts on what you saw today in the college ranks?
Well, the thing about the first round that makes it really difficult is that the underdogs have to play on the other team's home field. And I don't care what anyone says in college football, that's a huge advantage. I'm not saying Penn State would have lost, but it's a different game if they're playing down at SMU and 35,000 fans or whatever that is. And it's, the weather's warm and SMU isn't being asked to do something they've never really done before. I'm not saying that, but that's a huge factor. That's a part of it. Indiana, even though it's only 3 hours away, you're playing at Notre Dame. That's a difficult assignment. Clemson going all the way to Texas and playing in Austin. These are, I think that the one thing I will say is that I've always said this, that the results of what happens in a playoff or in the NCAA tournament does not validate or invalidate a team being there. It just doesn't. You're put into the playoffs or you're put into the NCAA tournament based on the resume that you have. And I'm sorry, if you're South Carolina, don't get blown out by Ole Miss. And guess what? You're in the playoffs. If you're Ole Miss, don't lose to a horrific Kentucky team and you're in the playoffs. Right? And if you're Alabama, how about score a touchdown against a horrific Oklahoma team? And then you're in the playoffs. I mean, they all had opportunities to get in the playoffs. The bottom line is Indiana, and say whatever you want to say. Indiana won 11-1. And I get a kick out of people who are saying, well, the Big Ten took care of them. Well, they had to play Michigan. It's not. Did the Big Ten know Michigan was going to be terrible this year? No.
They played both teams. They played Washington. They played both teams that were in the national title game.
Both teams that were in the national championship game last year. Indiana did, and they beat them both. Now obviously neither team is as good as they were last year, but the reality is, what the Big Ten had when they put the schedule out, they had the foreshadowing that those two teams were going to be terrible. I mean, it is what it is. But to me, if you go 11-1 or 11 and whatever, you know what I mean. You're worthy of being in a playoff field of 12 teams. At the end of the day, there's probably 4 or 5 teams that legitimately can win the national championship. Okay? The other thing, we're talking about 9 or 10 teams that we're probably going to choose 6 or 7 of, right? That are all good teams, but not great teams. So at that point, I'm sorry, who you lose to has to matter. It just does. I know that there are people that say that, well, you'd rather have good wins than avoid bad losses. You know what Indiana did when they played against all the teams they played except for one? They won by 30, which is what good football teams do. They blow out mediocre and bad teams. And they did it consistently every single week. So to me, you know what? The outcome of these games, it doesn't sway me one way or the other, because the reality of the situation is I look at the resume, the right teams got in, period. And then, one other thing, all this like revisionist history about, well, the look at the blowouts and this, that, and everything. Have you paid attention over the last 10 years of the playoff? Most of these games are blowouts, right? Including, like I said, Alabama. Well, let's see. The last time you guys played in the playoff, you lost 44-18. Okay? I'm sorry, no. You lost 27-20 last year to Michigan. The year before that, you lost 44-18. There's blowouts in these playoff games all the time for a number of reasons. So it's been just a bunch of SEC fanboys whining and crying is what it really comes down to.
And I tweeted this earlier, Paul. I said, they believe that they have at least the 6 best teams in the country in that conference. There is no format that is going to placate these SEC fans. There's no format that they're going to think that they were treated fairly in, because they think they have all of the best teams. And they fundamentally reject the idea of a national playoff. They don't think that they should have to prove it against anyone else in any particular season. They just think you're supposed to crown, whatever SEC team is the champion by whatever means they determine. I mean, there's just no way that these people are ever going to be happy, because there's always going to be 8 or 10 SEC teams that believe they belong in the playoff no matter what.
When I heard people from the SEC fanboys talking about Missouri, legitimately late in the season, Missouri should be in, that's when you just start saying, okay, now we're just being ridiculous. But reality is the pecking order of those 3 teams that, is South Carolina, were they the next team out? Well, it's hard to make that case when Mississippi, Ole Miss is also in that category, and they beat the hell out of South Carolina. But like Mississippi, they lost to Kentucky, who, by the way, Kentucky didn't beat any other SEC teams. And the last game of the year, they played Louisville and got boat raced. So, and then Alabama, I mean, they have the weakest case of the 3, if you ask me. You lost to a garbage Vanderbilt team, and you couldn't score a touchdown against a terrible Oklahoma team. Please sit down, shut up. Thank you.
Well, and the way their favorite network last night had Sean McDonough lecturing everybody about how Alabama belonged in that spot. I would have loved to hear what Sean McDonough had to say after that Notre Dame team beat Alabama substantially. Would he be saying the same thing? Alabama didn't belong? Absolutely not. So I'm kind of sick of that stuff as well. Everyone who's stuck with us through the college conversation, we appreciate it. Me and Paul love the college football. It's a big day. We talked for 40 minutes about the Steelers. So if you liked what you heard, we do plenty of college football talk as well. Subscribe to the channel, pop a like, help us out in the YouTube algorithm. Paul, I believe you'll be back Monday.
Yes.
We're juggling the schedule a little bit this week, folks. We're going to have the North Shore Drive with Christopher Carter on Sunday because we won't be doing it on Wednesday because the Steelers will be playing. So we'll have the North Shore Drive Sunday, Monday. Brian Bacca will have Chipped Ham and Football to get you ready for Steelers Chiefs on Tuesday. Paul and I will be back on Christmas Day to break down Steelers Chiefs. Then we'll have the North Shore Drive on Thursday, even though that's usually a Friday show. So a lot more coming your way. Please subscribe and join us for the ride. We look forward to talking to you all again next week. Thanks, Paul.
All right, we'll see you.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.